What's up, guys? We're back with another NZ set review. This time it's a little bit different. This is a review for NZ Set 8 Grand Adventure. This set is, at the time of when this video is going to drop, will be coming out today. So, unlike the other videos where we've had some kind of time to reflect on how it's impacted the game and stuff like that, this one's going to be a little bit more of like a prediction of what we sort of think. So bear with us as we go through it, but I think it'll be fun to still discuss like what we think of these cards and where we've seen them going so far. We'll just get right into it. This is a 45 card set, so like some of the other bigger sets, we are going to split it into two parts so that we're just not here all day. First one here, we're going to do styled and freestyle, and then next video we will get into all of the cards that are not those. We'll just get right into it. I've got Nick here with me again, my classic set review partner here. And I'll just go over this first card, Black Imitation Drill. It is a Heroes Only card. When this card enters play, its power box becomes a copy of a drill you control's power box until this card leaves play. Now, note, it doesn't become a copy of that drill. It is specifically like this card's box is now the text on that card. So it's still called Black Imitation Drill. It isn't the name of that drill or whatever. It just is Black Imitation Drill, but now says whatever that card says. It's nice in that you can now have two copies of like a one in play kind of drill, things like that. You can also it also stays copied until this card leaves play, not until the card that it copies leaves play. So if this is in play and the other card and you lose that one, this one still sticks around as the text that was on that card. So there's a lot of interesting ways you can use this. You can use it to double up on a drill that has, an effect that you can now have like double value out of. Or something that we've used it for quite a bit too is copying drills that don't have like a sort of stackable effect, but now need to be removed twice. So like if you use this on a Black Smoothness Drill or something, Black Smoothness Drill just says you can keep two cards in your hand at the end of your turn. So you don't get to keep like three if you have two Smoothness Drills, but now they have to get rid of Smoothness Drill twice before you lose your Smoothness Drill effect. Or Black Weakness Drill, which like you can't pay two stages to make them discard their hand twice. Like that doesn't make any sense, right? But now they have to get rid of your Weakness Drill two times. So there's some really interesting applications for that. You can use it obviously with more active stuff too, like a double champ drill to draw cards again or whatever too. But I think this card is going to be really, really fun to use. And one of the reasons that this is like a Heroes Only card is Hero Black is a particularly weak way to play Black most of the time. And that's almost exclusively because Stare Down is a card, and that works really well with Buffer Block. But also, like, with Black Right Kick and things like that, you lose those too. So you're definitely playing a kind of neutered version of Black if you're playing it Hero. So we wanted to give Black decks something really powerful that they could use as a Hero build. And this, we had to, with last season's errata list or whatever, we had to remove or limit Caught Off Guard Drill to one. And that is a thing that was... it's a big impact, but it was used mostly because of how strong that is in like the Orange Drill Majin Buu Saga deck. But there are some decks that can like take advantage of having two Caught Off Guard Drills, but aren't like a huge problem or whatever. And so we were like, well, what if this card will allow Black Hero to maybe have their second Caught Off Guard Drill back? So that's a neat thing that it works for too. Nick, what do you think? How do you think this card's gonna shape up?
I think you hit all the major points there. It's Heroes Only due to trying to offset the Black Right Kick plus the Stare Down Buffer Block combo, which is very fair. Being a second Caught Off Guard Drill for the decks that want it, super interesting. Protection for your Black drills is very good, and also just there's a lot of freestyle drills that add value to Black decks that this card would love to be a copy of. Quickness Drill, Champion Drill, as you mentioned. I also think if you look into Calamity builds. Master Roshi's Gawking Drill is one of my personal favorites to copy with this. So I think there's a lot of ways you can go with this. it's just going to be a different kind of deck, and anytime that we can have different kind of decks created, I think it's a good thing. This drill's been super neat in testing. We got a lot of different hero decks to try with black, which is always fun because, as Derek said, black is previously mainly a villain style due to the stare down and right kick. But yeah, I'm hoping this will open up black as a little bit more of a drill style. Black's got some super cool drills that are very fun to play. Imposing drill's amazing. Of course, weakness and smoothness in some of these cards. So some camp level 1 black decks that are playing hero are gonna love this card. It's gonna be super fun to see how it shakes out.
This was when we were designing this card. The first thing that we wrote it down and we're like, that can't exist, right? Like, it's going to be way too much. And then as we played it, we're like, it's just really fun, and it's not too much. You can't really duplicate the really strong, smoothness drills, weakness drills, the things that you would like that make really strong black drills. The typical ones, you can't really duplicate what they do. So it ended up not stacking into being that brutal or whatever. It was just really interesting to use.
Okay, so the other black card for the set is called Black Poisoning. It's an energy combat, relevant for black, of course. Energy doing 3 life cards of damage, costs 1 stage to perform. If successful, attach this card to your opponent's MP. While attached, your opponent discards the top card of their life deck at the beginning of each of their attack or attacks phases. Discard Black Poisoning when your opponent's MP is at their highest power stage during either player's declare step. So this card's got a lot to take in. It's an energy for 3 that costs 1, which is obviously not very good. It's not an attack you're normally going to play on its base form. But attaching to your opponent's MP is something that black does, just like Exertion attaches to your opponent's MP. And then the 1 card of damage, or 1 life card, 1 meal at each of their attack or attacks phases. A lot of games, this will hit them for an additional 3 life cards, and then it's like an energy for 6, and yeah, that feels fine. But, we've had a couple of games where somebody with a 1 PUR, something like that, is not powering up much, and there's a lot of combat entering. And I've seen this card do as much as 14 or 15 life cards just from the mill effect. It's a really cool card. It's a really cool effect, and you have to kind of be aggressive to make this work. You got to be aggressively entering on your opponent and trying to keep their power stages down, trying to keep the damage on them so that they don't get rid of it. But the slow grind that this card causes, it changes the way the game plays out in a lot of aspects. In theory, this can do a whole lot of damage. Most of the time, this does, energy for 3, and they milled 3 or something like that, and it feels pretty good when it's that.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with this is that, I think this card kind of only works in black because of how well it plays the kind of, hybrid beats game. A lot of black decks are sort of, both physical and energy at the same time. And this deck, like Nick said, you really do need to, stick one of these, enter combat, enter combat, enter, so that they're always, fighting for those stages. But if you're just, an energy beats deck, it doesn't matter that you're entering all the time because they're still going to get stages out of it. Mm-hmm. So you need to be throwing physicals, too. So you've got to have this kind of peppered around other big physical attacks. So it's a really interesting card in that sense. A thing that Nick didn't mention is that this doesn't have you can only have one of these attached clause on it that some of the other attached cards do. And so if you can start getting 2 poisonings on there and then they're milling 2 at a time for a couple of combats, it adds up. We've all seen blue spec ops drill, right? Just doing mill 2 a turn or whatever is even if that's all it's doing off of a Vic drill, that's enough to just be annoying after a few combats. So this one's even harder to get rid of because it's not just a non-combat sitting on the table. They've got to power up to full, specifically at the power-up step. So even if they Pycon's leg catch in the middle of combat, it doesn't matter. They still need to get through combat with the stages in hand, or at least close enough to power up to full. But I think this card's really cool. Nick made a great point that sometimes it does just stick around. You gotta figure out a way to deal with it. If you're a deck that just isn't powering up, it's just not gonna be around a bunch, or it's not gonna be going away. It's going to be around a bunch. Mm-hmm. If you're an ally deck, this is kind of tough to have just laying around. There's a lot of things that make this an adequately named poison for your MP. So you need to, especially if you're going to face a black deck, going into what I guess I imagine facing a black deck going into the like NZ8 era, you'll definitely want to have your like remove attached cards type effects handy, because if you're not going to power up, this card's going to be around, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So then we have Blue Beam Whip. It's an energy combat card that does 5 life cards of damage. You can pay the cost of this attack with either or both players' anger instead of power stages. Then it has Empower 2. For the remainder of combat, you may pay the cost of energy attacks you perform with either or both players' anger instead of power stages. So, energy attack for 5 life, solid damage. Could be 7 if you need it to. Also pretty good. It letting you not use power stages to pay for attacks. You can just use anger. That, for obvious blue decks, is good. The neat thing that we like when we were making this card, we really wanted a blue energy card that didn't inherently raise anger like on its, like you couldn't just basically like stick it into Enlightened and have it like blue energy attack for 5 life, lower your opponent's anger 1. That then now it's just like a raise your anger card or whatever. We wanted to sort of not do that. We wanted it to do something different. And I think this is a really cool way to still lean into that like anger as a resource thing that that we've sort of tried to make blue do. There's a lot of like little specifics about this card that are worth like kind of learning about early. So you can pay the cost of this attack with either or both players' anger. So that means you can do like it's an energy for 5, costs 2 because it's just a regular energy attack. So you can pay 2 power stages, or you can pay 2 of your anger, or 2 of your opponent's anger, or you can pay 1 anger of yours, 1 anger of your opponent's. Now it does say instead of power stages, so you can't do like 1 power stage, 1 anger. It has to be one or the other, but you can do that anger in like whatever combination works for you between players. So if you've got a couple anger, your opponent has a couple anger, you can pay both of those down to get the cost paid off. But you just have to kind of keep track of like how anger is laying around to be able to pay this off. If you're both at 0, or if only one of you has 1 anger, this card still costs its 2 stages. So you got to be on top of that. But there's a lot of ways to get this to be effective, especially in blue. Blue Trunk Saga has cards that raise your opponent's anger. Blue World Game Saga raises your own anger, so you can now pay with the anger that you're raising. You can now use that anger to pay for more attacks. So it turns Blue World Game Saga into this cool like Camp 1 deck that uses the anger as a resource as opposed to like a leveling system. So there's just some neat things you can do with it, but it's I think it's a cool card. I'm curious to see how it will actually like impact the blue energy space. But I think having the ability to have more essentially free energy attacks is a very good thing.
Yeah, so one other thing that I would like to talk about a little bit with this is that this can just be an anti-anger card too. So, if your opponent is any kind of leveling deck, and, you can just use this to basically negate all of their anger gaining for the entire turn. Notice that you're paying cost, so, this gets around things like Goku Sensei and ways that your opponent would have for you to not mess with their anger. This gets around all of those things, and since it's not empowered, it's for the remainder of combat. That means that you can pretty much control their anger for the turn. That also could lead into something like a Dragon's Victory. If you're anytime you can control your opponent's anger, you can set stuff like that up and keep them in a spot for that. One thing that this really does is that blue does not have any masteries that reduce the cost of your energy attacks. So blue gets into some holes where you have a couple energy attacks in one block, and you can't do the damage you need to because you don't have the stages to work with. So having this as an ability to maybe you can use this and then get 2 energy attacks, one from your anger, one from your opponent's anger, where you don't have to worry about it. Or you can pair this with Blue World Games, and maybe you use your opponent's anger to cast this for free, and then it's successful, so you raise your anger. Now your anger's turned on to where you can pay your anger for the next attack. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with this. I think that if you're an energy-specific deck, like this is going to be a card that you're going to have in your deck every time. I think if you're a hybrid deck, it's at least worth considering. I'm really wondering what the power level is going to shake out to be here. I feel like it's going to be one of those that like is very specific and very niche about when it feels great. But like I could also just be wrong, and this could just be an auto include in a lot of blue decks. It's a cool effect. It's definitely something you're going to play in a lot of anything that's got a lot of card selection, like a Yamcha. Like I'm going to put this in my Yamcha deck, for example, because there's a lot of times where being able to pay with anger instead of stages is going to be huge for a deck that really cares about having stages and stuff. So even if you're using the anger to perform attack so that you can stay in C against your opponent's physicals to reduce their damage, that's also beneficial. So there's a lot of cool things this card does. Really excited to see where it shakes out into the meta, but it's something, if you're playing a blue hybrid or a blue energy deck, you give it a shot. Let us know. Let's see how it goes. I think this has got potential to be not like some game-breaking outstanding card, but something that when you have it, you feel really good about it.
That's exactly where I think it's going to land too.
Okay, so the other blue card in the set is called Blue Feint. Blue Feint is a physical attack. You look at your opponent's hand, choose a card. You may choose a card. Your opponent must play that card in their next defender defense phase of April. So there's a little bit of confusion about this card. I expect it's going to happen, so I kind of want to go over how it works and try to be as clear as I can with it. So when you look at your opponent's hand and choose a card, first of all, you don't have to choose a card. So if you choose a card that cannot be played in their next defender defense phase, this is you're performing a physical attack, so they can't play an energy block, right? So you can't choose an energy block. What this card can choose is anything that stops a physical attack, right? So that's what it can choose. If you throw this at your opponent, you can look at their hand and then see what they have to offer, right? If they have a physical stop all and you want to waste it, make them waste it on this pat physical attack, you can do that. If they have a physical block that's like a Pycon's leg catch and they're already at full, you can make them use that right now and go ahead and shuffle the cards in but not get any value off powering up to full. This card, it enables you, if you lead on it, to kind of meld your entire combat to see what you can do. And it also, like, if you have energy attacks in your deck too, if you're playing a hybrid style, you can tell them they have to use their Omni block to stop this, and then maybe they don't have an energy block, so your energy attacks will get through. So what this card kind of does is it leads on like a Gohan's Kick, Majin Buu's Fury type effect, where you want to lead with it and use it to kind of pick your opponent's hand apart, right? So, or at least, at the very least, get an idea of what your opponent has to offer. You can't make this attack unblockable by choosing something they can't play or anything like that. You do have to choose, an applicable card that they can actually play in their defender defense phase, and it is just to defend against this attack, right? Like, that's what it means. You have to choose a card to defend against this attack. So, there's a lot of variations of how good this card is expected to be. Personally, I'm a little under impressed with it. I think that it's going to shake out to be a little bit weaker than we might think, but there could be decks that can really take advantage of this. I'll be curious to see what the Brewers of the league come up with, because this is definitely kind of a build around card. You want to have a deck that can capitalize on the power that this card does have, which is melding your hand and molding what your opponent's doing. I mean, it's not quite a stare down Confro type effect, but it does do a good impression of it sometimes. So, I'd be curious to see exactly how this shapes out when all's said and done. I personally am not a fan of these cards in my decks, but this is a build around card. This is a card you're going to want your deck to be able to capitalize on the decisions you get from using this card.
Yeah, I have great points. The one thing, people play blue face crunch, right? And it's just physical, get some stages, look at your opponent's hand. Mm-hmm. And this is, a little less immediately impactful than that in the sort of just look at your opponent's hand category. But if you get to rip a block out of it to block this just pad attack, it's going to feel really good. The thing that I think is really cool with this is when you start using it in situations where you have more knowledge, where if you've done say you have this card and a stare down or something, you've led with the stare down, and you can now rip. You can see what's in their hand, and then play this, and then get a really good colossal throw off afterward. That's cool. But even if you can have a deck that just sort of has access to knowledge all the time, I'm going to play 3 of this in Blue Bardock. because Bardock can see your hand all the time, so I know when this is going to feel really good to rip blocks out of your hand. Or if I've got Blue Mental Drill in play, where you play with your hand revealed, and I know when to rip the blocks out of your hand. There are times that this card's like really, really strong and really impactful at what it does. Nick's right that there are some times where you're going to be like, okay, physical attack, look at your hand, oh, no blocks, okay, I guess it's one stage, and then they're like, okay, I'll take it, and then nothing happens, you know? Or they've got 2 blocks, and you're like, oh, well, I guess you stop this one, and then it doesn't really matter. So, like, there are times where it will feel bad, but the times where it feels, like, the times where it hits, I think are gonna kill, you know? I think it's gonna be really, really strong in the times where it lands. But I think you've really got to time it right, you've got to set it up the right way. And like Nick said, I'm curious to see where this shakes out for like overall power level. But in testing, it was fun for me to use. I really liked playing it in my Bardock deck, and it was cool in a couple other spots where it was used. Getting to do this into like a turn where you've also got a chokehold into Colossal Throw into something, and you got to do all of that because you burned their one physical block. That's really, really cool. You've got to be a little careful with this because of the new Sensei that has blocks on it. There's, sometimes you're going to like say, oh, you got to burn your block now. And they're like, okay. And then they'll just use their Sensei block for whatever you wanted to try to get through anyway. So you just got to know like when it's right to use this. But I'm curious to see how it goes. I think it'll be pretty cool when you build it into the idea, the like point of your deck. All right, so we've made it to Namekian, and we've made it to a card Namekian is needed for a while. So this is Namekian Disrobe. It's a physical combat card. It's Transform. It stops an energy attack. If you declare it a Tokuwaza, remove up to one non-combat card in play, or a card attached to your MP from the game. Remove from the game after use. So, Namekian Transform block. They don't have one yet. Now they do. That's good. Every color should have their Transform block. I think Nick agrees that that's like a big thing that I think every color should have. So, stop an energy attack. That's good. Namekian energy block suite isn't like outstanding. And then you can remove a non-combat card in play, which Namekian struggles with doing, and it removes it. You can also, or I guess instead, remove an attached card, so you can get rid of like an exertion or something, which is great because Namekian does a lot of preventing, it does a lot of endurance, does a lot of rejuvenating and stuff like that. So getting rid of an attached card that says you can't use your endurance, the thing your Namekian deck is like good at, that's pretty good too. Or if if you got hit with that black poisoning card from earlier, there's just cool ways to use this to get around stuff. Funnily enough, if your opponent throws a black exertion and then attaches it to you, and then you transform this energy block out of your discard pile and then remove it with the same action, is pretty fun. We've gotten to do that a couple of times, and it's been pretty great. Overall, I think this is just a card that like Namekian is kind of sorely needed, and it feels super, super good to have access to, and especially being a transform card with a little bit of removal on it is awesome. What do you think, Nick?
So one of my big soapboxes with the card pool in general is that I think freestyle energy blocks are all terrible. So the thing about Namekian is, although it does have a really good energy block, it's a Namekian Heritage only energy block. So between things like PyCon and of course the newly spoiled Tamagamis, non-Namekian Heritage personalities need a way in Namekian to stop energy attacks. So this gives it a sore spot for them too. It can solve some of the problems that those two specific MPs would have otherwise. Also, I think this is just better in most decks than Energy Deflection is. A Transform block is obviously great. Removing the non-combat, Namekian can't remove non-combats. It can only discard them. So being able to remove a non-combat with this is very valuable. And then the card attached to your MP, you hit the big one. It's Exertion. Like, Namekian hates playing against black Exertion. So having an answer for that is very beneficial, especially against black, because black is usually a hybrid style that they're going to have their energy attacks. So you're going to be able to cash this in. This being a physical combat, I think is also really useful and really represented, because even Namekian energy attacks play a lot of Namekian physical combat cards. Shield Destruction is just insanely powerful. It's a card you're going to want to play in most of your Namekian decks, even if you're energy focused. So this being a physical combat is really going to cash in there. As Derek said, each style should have a transform blocks. I think that transform blocks are probably the best overall thing that NZ has done for the game. I think that transform blocks stop people from getting overrun, and I hate how snowbally this game can be sometimes. So the ability to have this transform block to, dig yourself out of a hole if you're getting snowballed a little bit is great. I think that this is the new auto include energy block in the Namekian decks. I think that some decks will want to split this and energy deflection, I think it's called. But most decks will prefer this, I think.
That's exactly where I'm at. I think that, I think every deck plays their transform block, except for like blue, and it's because their transform block is attached to a bad transform physical attack. But if you need it, there's transform block in blue. But I think every deck should be playing their transform block, having the kind of oh shit button access is so good in this game.
So the other Namekian card is very, very simple. Namekian Laser Beam. Energy for 8, cost 3. Damage from this attack is removed from the game instead of discarded. That's it. That's all this effect does. That's all it needs to do. Energy for 8 is, of course, a good number. Obviously, 8 meets all your 8 card effects, which is something that those decks are going to really care about. Cost 3 stages is actually usually a positive and not a negative in these builds. A lot of these Namekian energy decks are ally focused and things like that, between Cell and Dende and some of these MPs. So costing 3 is not a big deal. And then, anytime you can remove damage from attacks is super good. You hit their transform cards, or you hit, take away some of their expectant Trunks targets or anything like that. Like, this card is so generic and simple, but like the Namekian energy decks are just going to play this card every time. It feels good. Even if you're on like a pure physical beats deck, like, this is the card you stick in there as a one of, so that when you Dragon Punch, you have some big energy attack to go get. So there's a lot of cool value to this card. Like, I don't really think you need a 2-hour dialogue about what this card can do. It's very straightforward and simple. If you're playing Namekian energy, play this card. If you're playing a Namekian physical deck, you probably got one copy of this card in for a Dragon Punch target, and it's great every time. Super excited to see what people do with this, but I think its power level is generically good. Nothing game breaking here. Nobody's gonna put this in their deck and think that their deck this takes them over the top. But like, man, it's simple and good. Simple and good.
Yeah, like Nick said, it's such a simple effect. There's not a lot to say, but it does exactly the thing it should. The Namekian energy decks love it. It feels great to use. I love this card. I love how it's. As you've seen, if you've paid any attention to NZ cards, some of them are like kind of complex. They be doing stuff. But this card is like just classic good text on a card, and it's so exactly enough. It's very fun to see this card like turn out this simple and easy and like effective. So then we have Orange Sword Lunge, our first orange card. Now this is a physical combat card with a parenthetical that says, if your MP has sword in any of its power boxes, this card is considered to be a named card matching your MP. It's a physical attack doing +4 power stages of damage. For the remainder of combat, all of your orange style attacks are considered to have sword in the title. If successful, search your discard pile for a card that adds damage to your attacks and place it into your hand or into play. So we'll just start at the top. So orange physical attack. We've talked at length about trying to make the orange physical, just like orange physical World of Games beats deck, a thing. This one, like, you could put this in that deck, and it will be fine too, but really this one leans into like an orange sword deck. So the parenthetical right now, of course, works with Trunks Weapon Master and with Tapion. Those are the only two guys who have sword in their name, or in their power box. You can play this in like orange Bookworm Sword, which, like, I think this card makes almost a deck, so that's pretty cool. But as far as like that actual effect being considered a named card, it is for Trunks or for Tapion. But Physical for +4 is cool if you're playing it in the Mastery, which you're going to because that's where it's for. It's going to be +6 plus any life cards or whatever that you get. And then your orange stacks are considered to have Sword in the title. That, on the surface, doesn't sound like super important, but we'll get to that in just a sec. If successful, search your discard off a card that adds damage. So most of the time, you're going to use this to rebuy Orange Joint Restraint Drill back into play, because that's what you want your attacks doing. But you can also use it to grab things like Gohan Swordplay Drill that does add damage, but now also makes your sword cards effective. And if you're playing an orange sword deck, you're going to do some orange physical stuff, but you'll also be doing like a bunch of sword cards because, of course you are. That's how the sword package works. So it'll be nice to have that. But if this gives all of your orange cards sword in the title, and you've got Gohan Swordplay Drill in play, it also means now that all of your orange if successful effects are orange secondaries. So this card has orange in the title. If Gohan Swordplay Drill is already in play, this if successful is now a secondary on this card even. So you can play this card, immediately get a Joint Restraint Drill, immediately get another Gohan Swordplay Drill, get a Trunks Swordplay Drill, get a Sword of Trunks. Like, there's a bunch of cards that you could grab that you can place into play. Or you can grab things like Orange Flight, which is an attack that just adds damage to your next attack. You can do the Orange Power Punch, which adds damage to your attacks based on the endurance on your cards. So like there are like things you can grab with this that will either extend your hand or make the cards you already have do more. A neat thing that this can do, which is really nice for sword decks because you're probably going to play it anyway, is this searches for a card that adds damage. And a card that adds damage is Tree of Might. So you can put a Tree of Might into play with this card. So you have like a cool battleground removal type effect attached to your new fancy orange sword attack. And then, like I said, a sword deck's going to play that anyway because you got a bunch of freestyle drills, because you've got your Gohan freestyle, your swordplay drills to bring out, you've got a Tapion swordplay drill to bring out. So there's a ton of things that it works for there. And then just the named card thing, that's important too. So if you've got, if you're playing like Weapon Master, we wanted to try to have this be like a target you could grab off of your Weapon Master effect, which helps set up a whole turn. Orange Sword Trunks has like never been a thing. Trunks specifically, right, has always been freestyle. But we have been trying with this. It like opens him up to being played in a different way, which I think is really exciting. Plus, it's named, so your like where am I going?
Speedy Flights.
I don't know. Speedy Flights. Thanks. Yeah, so that works there. Thank you. I lost the Speedy Flight word. Yeah, this now being a named card that Speedy Flight can grab to then extend the whole process of setting up the sword combo, as opposed to just grabbing like another sword attack, is a really neat thing too. I just think this is a really neat card. I think it's going to, in testing, it made Orange Tapion like a very real contender, which was really exciting because I love Tapion and I think his stack is really cool, but I think he is not hyper competitive right now. I think this really pushes him a lot closer. Making Gohan Sword a much closer to playable deck is cool, and then introducing a playable Sword Trunks deck in orange is also really exciting.
Yeah, so Derek kind of dived into all the sword variants of this. I want to go the opposite route and just talk about Orange World games in general. I think this card is an auto-include as 3 of in Orange World games, even if you're not doing anything that has anything to do with swords. This, if successful effect, is kind of, it's not Blue Colossal Throw, but it kind of does a nice impersonation. So Derek kind of went over the 2 big hits, which is Orange Joint Restraint Drill and Tree of Might, but there are others that you really need to be aware of. The first big one is Orange Flight. So this, in a way, can just string together an attack, right? Orange Flight says physical +4, all your attacks do +1 stage for the rest of combat. All right, so you can use this to turn this into multiple attacks and pick up Orange Flight and go to town with it. Also, another one that I've used a lot in testing is, I believe it's called Orange Energy Guard. It is an energy block.
Yep.
It's already played in a lot of Orange decks, but the thing with Orange Physical is that none of their energy blocks are any cards that you're like that are outstanding to you. But now that you have access to this, you have a clear cut. This is the energy block I'm playing. It's Orange, Energy Guard, stops an energy. Your attacks 2+2 stages, raise your anger 1. So you have a couple of options you can get with this, from the battleground to the drill to the energy block to the physical attack, and just having that wide range. As you've seen with Colossal Throw, the big thing about it that's different from Axial Kick, although it isn't if successful, is that you can just get a blue card, not a red attack like Axial Kick gets. This kind of gives you a little bit of that same functionality, although it's a little more specific in that you can get an energy block, you can get a physical, you can get a drill, you can get a tree of might, you can get a bunch of different things. This card is an easy auto include for Orange World Games. I do think Orange World Games is getting to a point where it's close to being competitive, and I'm really hoping this pushes it over the edge. I really hope people give this a shot in those builds and those decks, because in testing, Tapion is one of the ones that I did most of the testing with it, and it felt really good. But I also just slapped this into Orange Mariaco, and man, it felt great in that deck. So I do think that this card is going to help go a long way to help Orange Physical be a little bit more live as a deck overall. The sword thing is cool, and the sword thing has its value. There are things that make the sword deck unique and cool that nothing else does. But just having an orange beatdown card that really just overarchingly helps the playstyle is very important. And this card does it better than basically anything else we've made so far in NZ.
Agreed.
So the other orange card in the set is Orange Taxing Blast. This is an energy attack for 5 life cards. You can discard up to 3 cards from your deck. If successful, energy attacks you perform for the remainder of combat do +X life cards, where X is the amount of cards you discarded from your deck. So, real quick, the discarding up to 3 life cards from your deck is a secondary. So, and the value you get from it isn't if successful. So there's a little bit of risk-reward type situation here. The problem I've had with this card so far in testing is that it doesn't pump itself. So you really want to have multiple attacks to get the value from it, or you want to have a reason to put cards into your discard pile. So in Orange, what's the reason to do that? Well, it's Evolution Mastery. So this card has a clear home in Evolution Mastery as a way to put some more cards in your discard pile to try to continue to level you up and use the effects from Orange Evolution. Also, if you just draw one of those hands that has, a scatter shot and a speed shot or something, or a couple of multiple energy attacks, then you can get a lot of value out of this if successful, and you can pump out a lot of damage. I think this card's very specific. It's not a card you're going to just put into every orange energy deck. I do think the evolution decks are going to want it a good percentage of the time. And then, like I said, if you're playing a bunch of energies that stay on the table to be used again, I know there was an orange Bulma that was floating around that was about stays on the table cards and stuff like that. I think that this card would be outstanding for decks like that can keep the pressure up. If you discard 3 life cards and you can hit 2 more energy attacks to add +6 to those, that's amazing. So that's kind of where, to me, that's where the line is, right? If I'm going to discard the 3 cards here, I want to get 6 damage out of those 3 cards. So that's, out of those 3, that's pretty reasonable, give or take. So, if you throw this and it's going to be good, whether you've stare downed or maybe you let on a speed shot and they couldn't stop it, or, and you have a feeling this card is going to be successful, then the milling effect is going to feel like a power up instead of a power down. And look, and if you're low on life cards, this can just be an energy for 5. Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes you just need another attack. You just throw a generic energy. It'll trigger your Cell Saga Mastery because it's orange. It'll cost 1 less and do 1 more if you're Trunk Saga. So, I think that this card could go in a lot of different decks, but the 2 main ones that stand out to me are the I'm going to throw a bunch of orange energy decks and the evolution shells that need the cards in their discard pile.
Yeah, I mean, Nick really hit it on the head with this one. It started its journey into making the set as an orange evolution support card. We wanted a kind of active way to help push the number of cards you kept in your discard pile, and this is a cool way to do it. Evolution does level you, so in theory it sets your stages to full again, which means you're maybe gaining stages at a reasonable rate, which means an orange evolution energy deck makes a decent amount of sense. So it felt good there. You're going to play like a number of orange cards. Of course, if you're playing an evolution deck, this means you're probably going to hit two, three orange cards off of this mill, which helps set up most of your cost of leveling again the next turn. This card doesn't RFG after you use it, so that goes to the discard too. So that's now maybe 4 orange cards you've put into your discard pile. Doesn't take a whole lot more to have like a whole nother level worth of leveling up ready for next turn. So that's an interesting thing too. There's not a lot more to say about this card. I think that if you're going to play Evolution, you're going to play it. I think if you're going to play the kind of stays on the table energy attack orange deck, which you probably are because that's just like the best way to play orange energy, you'll probably play this. I think it's cool. I'm curious to see how much people will like. I'm curious to see what people will think of this card in actual use. I think it's neat. It is the disparity between like the mill being before the if successful does mean that you have to pay the extra kind of cost without knowing if the payoff is going to be there. But if you build your deck to know that that there's more of a payoff than just the rest of this card text, like Evolution, it feels fine to have that. So I'm interested to see where this card goes. Ooh, Red Impenetrable Aura. Energy Combat Transform. Stops a physical or energy attack. You may raise your anger 1 level. If you declare Tokuwaza, you may transform this card as though it was a physical combat card. So, end of the day, this card is crazy simple. Omni Block, raise your anger 1, maybe, if you want to. Red doesn't have an Omni Block that you want to play that is any good. This is the good Red Omni Block. They've been fiending for one for a long time, and this is great to have. They also need a transform block. Red needs like transform period, and this is like a huge step forward for their little transform core. Having the anger gain on it is cool if you want it. You don't have to if you don't. And then you can transform this as though it was a physical combat card. It means that you can play this in a physical or energy deck. So it's good for everything. We knew that Red A needed a transform block bad enough, and B needed an omni block bad enough that we wanted this to be good for everyone. Like if you're an energy deck, you can have this. If you're a physical deck, you can have it. If you're a hybrid deck, you can make even better use of it. This card, if you know like the shortcomings of playing Red at this like era of the NZ experience, you know that this card is like wildly needed, and it feels so good to finally have it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think there's a whole lot to add about this card. Like, I'm going to put this in as a 3 of in every single red deck I play. I can't imagine there's a red deck where you're not going to do that. I know that there will be some concern that, black has, this block that gains you stages and does this extra effect, but don't underestimate how good being able to transform as a physical or energy combat is. It's incredibly strong. It just means that, it's never dead, and it can go in basically every red deck, and you'll feel really great about it in every single red deck. To me, don't overthink this. Put this in your deck as a 3 of. It's the best red Omni in the game by a lot anyway, and the transform is very valuable. Even if you don't want to raise your anger, it's a May effect. Like, just play this card.
Yep. This card was done really early in the set, and like instantly we were like, yeah, this is it. This is the text. It's all it needs. It's perfect.
So the next red card is Red Contemplation. So this is a lot different than the previous card. This is a non-combat. If you are familiar with your score history, there is one red non-combat, non-drill in the entire game, and it is Sensei deck only. So this will be the first real red non-combat. Use when entering combat. Raise your anger 1. Look at the top X cards of your life deck, where X is your anger level. You may put any amount of those cards at the bottom of your deck. Put the remaining cards on top of your life deck in any order. If your anger is 3 or higher, draw a card. Okay, so for those of you who play Magic, this is the Scry effect in Magic. It is a very strong effect. The problem this card does have sometimes is that Victorial exists. And so, red generally doesn't like Victorial anyway, so if you can get rid of Victorial, that's great. But basically, if you can set this up and your anger's at 3 or 4 when you use it, being able to scry 3 or 4 and fix your top of your deck, set up the cards you want to draw, and then getting an additional draw card is insanely good. Even if you can't set it up, there are times when I'm at 1 anger or 2 anger, and I just do this as a way to gain an anger. And, a non-combat that says when entering combat, raise your anger 1, that doesn't feel like it would be that strong, but it has a lot of effects where it is that strong. Now, especially if you get to draw a card off of it, that obviously is going to feel great every single time. But this card basically, if you're not all in on a specific type of beatdown, if you're playing some kind of hybrid deck, or if your deck's a little slower, or anything like that, where you can afford to play non-combats, if you're on Pulverize, in any kind of non-combat base red deck, drill deck, this card's really strong. It's an effect that seems underwhelming on its top, on its cover, but I think this is just a good card. If you're playing an MPPV deck in testing, this turned out to be pretty good in those decks too. And those are decks that generally don't want to play non-combats. But it felt good. It felt good to play this card. The anger that your opponent can't really answer feels good. And then just the ability to be at the anger level you need to be at to draw a card off this is great. And, the problem with MPPV decks is always you still got to play some blocks. And so if you're playing against an all-physical deck and you draw your energy block, you're not going to get your anger from your energy block because you're not going to get to use it. So what this does, even if it just raises your anger 1 and lets you scry 2, you can look at those top 2 and it's like, okay, well, there's red blocking hand. I definitely want that against this physical deck. And, there's an energy block to the other one. Well, I don't want that, so let's get rid of that. Let's put that at the bottom. This card is great. It's been great in a lot of matchups. If you are any kind of deck that is not super, super fast, I like this card. I like this card a lot in MPPV. I've liked it a whole lot in unstable-based decks as well, where it'll be the first thing you do when entering combat, so you'll gain 2 anger off of it, which getting you to 3 and 4 is really easy to do when it gains 2 anger. So this card's really cool. I'll be interested to see how it makes its way into the meta. I'm not sure this is a card you'll play 3 of, but like in most of my test decks, I've been working with it as like a 2 of, and when I've drawn it, it's felt really good. You put it into play, and then if your opponent enters on you, yeah, they can victorial you and lower your anger a little bit, but when you use it, since it's when entering combat, you'll get to use it before your opponent's victorial, and it's really easy to turn on.
Yeah. I think the thing that's really understated about this card, scrying the move cards top or bottom thing is really good. We've talked before a bunch about how red's overall hand size is not particularly high. Red doesn't have a huge action per turn economy. You do have critical blow or axial kick. If you hit those, then you can extend your turn out a little bit, but the general turn in red doesn't have a lot of that. So even if you can do 1 or 2 cards that you can move out of the way, you can really help to maximize the value. I'm going to have 3 cards in my hand, or maybe 4, and I want to make sure that as many of these 3 or 4 cards that I get are going to be bangers. And Contemplation helps you move, even if you're at 0 anger and you use this to raise 1, you just look at the top card and be like, ooh, I don't need that, and just throw it away. It feels so good to have a little bit more control over the things you're going to draw. I mean, Roshi, right? Roshi's obviously great. It's 6 cards, and there's never going to be 6, but Roshi is 6 cards, and it's one of the best decks in the game because it sets its 6 up every turn, and that's great. Gohan Bookworm is super played because it's top 12. What's the other? 18. 18 is also super playable because digging into the top of your deck to set up your turn feels really, really good. And so having this as kind of an on-demand use when entering combat thing feels good. Getting anger as you enter combat is super fun. There are turns where you're at 4, and this just levels you as you enter combat, which is super fun. You can get some really cool stuff off of that with Arinsu specifically, who has a when you enter or when you reach this level draw a card effect, as well as a when entering combat draw a card effect.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have this kind of you can have this at 4 anger, pop it, level, draw a card, use the when entering combat effect, draw a card, and so you can kind of pile up the value that you can get out of that. Now obviously that's sort of a Christmas land turn of getting it to line up that way, but this is a card that feels super cool in Arinsu. Red Arinsu feels really, really good. So I don't know. I think this card is awesome. It was really fun to make a red non-combat, which is, Nick said, is just a thing that doesn't exist. I'm very curious to see if you guys are as excited about this card as we are in actual play. Alright, so we move out of red into Sand. So we've got Sand Arrogant Strike. Physical attack doing +4 stages of damage. For the remainder of combat, you may play with your hand revealed. If you do, and you declare to Takuwaza, raise your anger 2 levels, and this attack does an additional +X life, where X is the number of cards in your hand. So, Saiyan, always going to have a lot of cards in their hand. That's the Saiyan thing to do. The weird thing, as odd as it is for Saiyans who transform into different forms all the time, is they don't gain a lot of anger naturally. So we wanted Saiyan to have another like solid 2 anger card. Now the like pompous ego of a Saiyan really like shows here, where you're like, you know what? Look at my hand. You can see it all turn. I'm going to punch you with 6 attacks, and all of them are going to do a bunch of extra damage. You can see them coming. You know what they are, but just know you're just going to get hit with all these. It's just really fun to use. It's like it slots so well into the typical Saiyan like physical beats package. Weirdly enough, it's like one of the first cards that I think we have printed in all of the NZ history that you might actually play in like Saiyan Broly, because it just works. It does make for a slightly different build in that you like this might be pushing you to level off of off of Electrified, and maybe then you're not doing the typical like just get to Electrified barely and stay there forever. But you might still play this as a Saiyan deck that wants to do the like leveling through the stack, doing your like big attack 2 times thing. So there are ways that this like is applicable, but it's not. It doesn't. It was fun to design a card that still doesn't like 100% slot right into Saiyan Broly physical classic deck. That's always been a thing we've tried to avoid doing. That is a deck that has been historically great and hasn't needed a ton of love. So it's been a fun challenge every time we make one of these kind of like Saiyan physicals to find a way to like eke it into not quite being exactly what that deck wants. And I think this is that. But I think almost every other Saiyan deck, especially like Saiyan Cell Saga decks, right, are going to play 3 of this. I think it's awesome. I love using this card. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, I think one thing that Derek kind of got into a little bit is that Saiyan doesn't have a lot of anger cards, and that's pretty straightforward. This card has been good enough that we think that there might be a Saiyan anger deck that exists now. It's probably Cell Saga, where you just draw a whole bunch of cards and you just focus on the Saiyan cards that do give you anger, things like this and things like Dash and Kick and some of those effects. There's also some other ways to cheat a little bit with the Buu Saga Goku powers and some things like that. But we think that there could be a Saiyan MPPV deck that exists. Now, maybe it's a beatdown deck that can also just win by MPPV sometimes, which is cool. Multi-victory decks are decks that people like to play anyway. They're fun decks to play. I think this could open up that avenue a little bit more. But as far as, for a standard old Saiyan deck, any Saiyan deck that wants to level is going to love this card. I mean, if you're on Gohan, you're going to like this card. Future Gohan's going to like this card. Most Vegeta stacks will. I think Broly overall could play this card. He's got to be a little bit more careful. But, there are matchups in your Broly when you want to go into 3 and 4 and just be at high power level and beat down and try to win the game quickly. So it does happen occasionally. I do think that this card is going to slide into a lot of just generic Saiyan decks as a good card and see some play there. But I think it could also open up some avenues for some new and interesting ways to play Saiyan decks.
And one thing that we didn't mention is that you may play with your hand revealed part, right? So like if you've got a hand that's full of like uniquely tactical stuff, which doesn't happen a ton with Saiyan because a lot of times you're just playing cards that hit and then have like a secondary that's just going to be good regardless. But if you've got like, oh man, I need this hand to be a little more secretive, you can still lead on this and it just be a physical for +4, and that's not nothing. So it's cool that you have an option to do it. It doesn't just like force you to reveal your hand and do the whole rest of the thing. I don't know. I'm very excited about this card.
Well, and if you're playing something like Settle Down, and you're playing against a deck that's really bad against Settle Down, you can use this card both to help you get to Settle Down and then choose not to raise your anger when you're there to try to stay there. Yep. So there's a lot of value in any card that gives you multiple options is a card that is going to be very valuable in your deck. So the other Saiyan card in the set is Saiyan Orb Toss. This is a transform card. It's an energy combat. It has a parenthetical that says you may use a Saiyan style non-combat to transform this card. So that's super, super interesting, super unique. It is an energy attack for 5 life cards. You may lower your anger to 0 to have this attack do plus X life cards, where X is the amount of anger lowered this way, and then prevent X power stages of damage from your opponent's next physical attack this combat. Okay, so a couple things here. Let's start with the overall basics of the card. This is an energy combat. That's an energy attack that you can use a Saiyan-style non-combat to transform. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, what Saiyan-style non-combats are you going to want to use to transform this card? Well, they're mostly drills, right? So this is, in theory, this card is mostly for the prevention deck. It's for the deck that's going to play Flexibility Drill and Best Friends Drill and a lot of those type effects. There's also things like Saiyan Battle Armor. Those decks tend to play a few more non-combats than most Saiyan decks and tend to run into spots where, all right, well, I'm set up, I use my mastery, draw a card, well, crap, I drew a non-combat with my World Games mastery. Well, this gives you something to do with that non-combat. So, this gives you a couple of different options. Those decks also tend to gain a lot of anger just like randomly, and most of the time they don't really want to level up. So this being able to set your anger to 0 is pretty beneficial too. Even if you're just setting it, you lower it to anger, energy for 7 that has transform is good enough. And preventing X damage stages from your opponent's next physical, it's the same thing. This is an energy deck, and preventing the damage is both good for the prevention deck and just good for any generic energy deck. So this is a card, you're not going to play this card in Saiyan Broly. You're not going to play this card in Future Gohan. This is a card that's going to play specifically in a defensive energy beatdown deck, or a deck that has the drill setup, the drill package of the prevention style with your with all your Saiyan drills. And there's a couple non-combats you can play. You can play the one that stops your opponent from using their personality power and stuff, but mostly what this is it's going to be a card that you'll play in your drill decks that will turn some value into your drills, into your battle armors that you draw off your mastery, or you draw when entering as a defender, and it's like, man, I got these 2 non-combats in my hand. Well, maybe you can turn one of them into this attack and it'll keep you going. So overall, the card's been good in testing in those specific decks. Again, I've said in all these videos, I think the core of NC should not be to just print good cards. It should be to print cards that help styles and decks that really need them, and, and this deck really needs a good effect like this.
Yeah, I think the fact that it has transform makes it so, on demand, like the transform effects just do. But like Nick said, those decks, the Saiyan prevention deck does have some anger gain in like random places, and sometimes you're like, man, I can't do anything because I'm on a level, and I can't level because I can't lose all my drills because that's the thing my deck does. So it's like tough to make that decision. But this one lets you say like, well, I'm just going to transform this into some more damage. Now it does say you can use a Saiyan non-combat, but you don't have to. So you can still use a Saiyan energy combat card. Mm-hmm. So there's still plenty of times where you just pitch a regular, and you pitch a Saiyan blocking fire, or Saiyan covering fire. Sorry.
Yep, you're at 4 anger. You don't want to raise your anger and level, so you pitch it to this, and now your anger's at 0.
Yep. Yeah, it's just nice to have access to a little button that just says like, let's slow it down a little in that deck. Nick's right that this is not going to go into like almost every Saiyan deck, but it will go into the one that it goes into. It just like fiending for this card, and it's been really good to have. I'm really excited for this one to exist for that deck. I think it's still, like, if we're being fully transparent, I still think the like Saiyan prevention deck is like not quite there. Sometimes it lines up really well and is like really tough to get damage through, but I think overall that deck is like not quite it. But this card really helps get it a lot closer to that, closer than I think it's ever been. Okay, so we're out of freestyle, or we are out of styled cards, and we're now into our freestyle suite. So this card is called Retaliation. It's an energy combat card. Energy attack doing 2 life cards of damage in power 3, so maybe 5. If your opponent performed a successful physical attack in their last attacker attacks phase, this attack costs 0 power stages to perform, so maybe you get an energy for 2 for free. Also, this attack does plus X life cards of damage, where X equals the amount of life cards of damage you took in your last Defender Defends phase. So, this card is a little bit like the parallel that I've made with it is it's a little bit like Frieza's Ready. It's just kind of a card that you have. You eat some damage, and then you punish your opponent for doing the damage to you. The difference, though, is this card is in your hand. Frieza's Ready, you don't have to keep it in your hand and hold on to it or whatever, but it's on the table, and so they can see it coming, so they know maybe I'm going to throw this like 8 damage attack first to see if they'll mill me for 16, and then I can hit them for like a physical for 14 afterward and not take 28. So this card is a little bit more like gotcha than that because they can't see it, but it doesn't do like double damage or whatever like that card does. It's not mill, so it's still damage. It's still attached to an attack. So there's like some balance differences, but you get an energy attack for a flat 2 that is maybe free. If your opponent hit you with a physical, which is the thing that is the biggest villain against a energy deck anyway, so you like if you get a benefit for your opponent doing the thing that hurts you most. And then if you like were already at 0 and took a bunch of damage off of it, you can use this to just punch back for like a huge amount of damage. I've played this even in games against like Nick here where he's punched me for like 8 and I'm like, okay, retaliation for 10 for free. He's like, oh yeah, I guess I take that. Sometimes it just connects. It's really fun to use. It is like it's a little bit sketch in that you have to take damage. Your opponent has to have done a successful physical, whatever. Like, so there's a lot of times where this sometimes is just energy for 2 costs 2. Well, then you make it an energy for 5. So energy for 5 costs 2, and there's like no other text on this card, and that feels like mostly bad, right? But the fact that you can sometimes just trigger this into being like if a boo punches you for 11, you're like, all right, well, this is now an energy for 13 and cost me 0. It's a very big clapback punish, and is a really cool addition, I think, to energy decks, and how easy it is to be punished for just being an energy deck by the like natural strength of a physical opponent. So I think this is a really cool card. I don't know that it will go into everything. I don't even know that it's going to go into like every energy deck, but I do think that energy decks will love this. I've really enjoyed putting it into stuff. I like having this right alongside my Lonely Canyons and stuff, and just having more access to kind of free things to do as an energy deck never feels super bad, even if it's just an energy for 5.
So a couple of things to note about this. Even if you're playing in an energy mirror, if your opponent hits you with an energy for 5 or 6, you can just immediately use this. They hit you energy for 6, you can just use this to make an energy for 8 next turn. The plus X damage does not have to be a physical attack. It just says the attack does plus X, where X is the amount of life cards you took. So whatever made you take life cards, whatever kind of attack that was, like, you can still get value out of this in an energy mirror. Because if this only had effect for physical attacks, I'm not sure it would be playable. But because that even in an energy mirror, you can use this to just basically just one up whatever they did, right? And like Derek related it to Frieza's Ready, and it's kind of the same boat where if you're pretty sure this is going to get through, and then maybe you don't use your endurance and things like that. Oh, they hit you energy for 7, you take 7, maybe you can use endurance 2 in your 5th card, and you just choose not to. You just take all 7. That way you can do 9 back to them. I mean, there's some value in that kind of thing too. As far as where this card actually fits into decks, I think most freestyle energy decks will play it. I think some styled will and some styled won't. It really depends on what your deck's doing. And, at the end of the day, like, this effect is cool and it does something very useful. But, like, some energy decks are just too tight with their energy attacks and they can't afford to play this card. Like, I would wonder if Orange would be able to actually play this card. I'm not sure. But, Blue maybe. Some of the other styles that, maybe they don't have as many good focused energy attacks, they'd probably get some value out of this. So, it's kind of back and forth on when this card's going to feel great. I do think that it's going to see like a small amount of play here and there. It's more of a niche card. It's kind of cool. It has a really sweet effect. And, like, this card's not going to be like meta warping, meta defining. So when you do get it to go off, your opponent's not going to see it come. And that's always the best part, right? Is, they hit you for a big attack. And, I had a game in testing where I was at 2 above and got Sand cross punched. And I took 8. And I'm like, all right, just 10 you back. And they're like, yeah, okay. And then they throw their next attack and I get the leg catch. And it's like, yeah, I could have let catch the first card, but now because I had this in my hand, I got to get value out of this too. And so there's a lot of cool effects like that where you can sequence your cards a little differently because you know you're going to get your, you be able to set up a free energy attack for 7 or 8 life cards, and that's really strong. So, overall, it's a cool card. It's a cool effect. I don't know how, meta changing this card's going to be, but I think that you're going to play it occasionally in decks, and, when you get your opponents with it, they're never going to see it coming. It's going to feel real cool.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down a lot to that same sort of feeling that Freeze Ready has, where Nick and I are a unique example in that we both think Freeze Ready is fucking great, but not everyone does. But that card is one of those where, like, sometimes that card, you play it, and you're like, all right, it's on the table, and then your opponent throws an attack that removes it on combat, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess. But, like, when you get a Freeze Ready to just, like, mill your opponent for 16, like, that feels really cool. And this card is a very similar feeling. Like, if you line it up to be right, the payoff is so good.
Okay, so a lot of what we talked about with this set and with all NC sets is that we don't want to print a lot of meta-defining cards. Well, sometimes things happen and, meta-defining cards are printed. This card is called Piercing Beam. This is an energy combat. It's an energy attack, and it says cards that end combat or stop all physicals or energy attacks cannot be used for the remainder of combat. That card effect might sound familiar to you, as the parenthetical for this card says this card's title is considered Gohan's Kick for deck construction purposes. So when we talk about printing a card that completely changes the meta, this is the card that we're talking about. This card is really straightforward and really simple. If you've played Gohan's Kick, this card is Gohan's Kick. It is Gohan's Kick, but it's an energy attack, so it does cost 2. That is something to factor in for it. But otherwise, you're going to play this card in all the decks where you would want to play Gohan's Kick if it were an energy attack. One of the biggest problems Energy Deck has always had in Standard is that they can't play Majin Buu's Fury and Gohan's Kick very well. Now, they end up playing them anyway sometimes, and it feels really bad because physical for 3 stages in your Energy Deck is terrible. But all those problems go away here. Energy decks have traditionally always been bad against control decks, against ball decks, because those decks just in combat so well and so realistically, and you have to sacrifice so much to play Gohan's Kick. So if you're sacrificing to play Gohan's Kick, what you're really doing is you are crippling yourself in, energy mirrors and in especially against physical decks, which is energy's main weakness anyway. So what this card does, realistically for the meta, is it makes energy decks something you can play in Standard, which is great to me. I have purposely not played a lot of energy decks in Standard because I think you're handicapping yourself to do that. I think that if you're purposely choosing to play energy decks in Standard, you are handicapping yourself. And I would not recommend doing that. This card fixes that problem completely and totally. Like, I think that now energy decks have made a way into the game where because of NZ, they are totally reasonable choices at all times. This card, to me, if you're playing Standard, is an auto-include as 3 of in your energy decks. If you are playing Tough Enough, I think this card's still good enough to just be played in most Tough Enough decks that are energy-based decks. If you would rather have an energy attack than a physical attack, you just swap your Gohan's Kicks for this card. It feels great. It's everything you think it's going to be. And I think that this card is absolutely going to change the Standard meta. I'll be real curious to see how many more Standard energy decks we see popping up. But just as a way to handle control decks and to fight against those, I know there's been a lot of I won main event 2 this year with a Goku Young Again deck that could just Saiyan Planet Explosion every single combat. That it just cancels energy decks completely. And that's the problem with Standard energy decks. They've always just been canceled by effects like that. Well, here's your answer. This card totally stops that. This card is amazing. It's going to completely change the meta, in my opinion, and I'm real excited to see what kind of damage it can do.
Yeah, there is a reason that this card was revealed yesterday. Like it was, it's huge. It's the impact it's going to have, I think, is massive. For something that sounds so simple as like, just go on the kick again. Like, it's crazy what an impact it's going to have. People have been asking for an energy Gohan's Kick for 4.5 sets now. So, like, it's cool that it finally got to happen. It feels great here. I think the art is awesome. I think everything about this card rules. I'm really happy to see it in the game, and I think Nick hit every point square on the head. Energy and Standard, like, build your deck to be ready for Energy and Standard, because it's going to happen.
Worth mentioning too, and I forgot to mention this, is on me, because it counts as Gohan's kick for dex construction purposes. You can't play both. Now you can if you mix and match to up to 3 or up to 4 if you're Gohan, but you can't play 3 piercing beams and 3 Gohan's kick because they are considered the same card for deck construction purposes. Worth mentioning.
Thank you. Great point. All right. So Bulma's Ultimatum Combat, which is a strange card type for a Bulma card, but hear me out. So, parenthetical, you cannot choose a main personality, Dragon Ball, Sensei, or Mastery with this card. Okay, so we're going to be picking something. Alright, so choose up to 5 cards your opponent has in play, or under a card in play. So, okay, makes sense why you can't pick their MP or the Sensei or the Mastery. You gotta pick their Nons or their Battlegrounds, allies, whatever. So, your opponent divides those into 2 piles. Then you choose and shuffle it, you shuffle one of those piles into their life deck. They get to keep the rest of their cards that you didn't pick. And then if Vegeta's in play and is not your MP and combat, that is not incredibly common, but I mean maybe you're going to be a Bulma deck and play a Vegeta ally to like get a combat ender in your deck. But generally, that's like more of a flavor win for if you've seen the show and you know the scene, you know why it's on there. But really, what this card does is it cleans up the board state, and it does it in a really, really fun way. Making your opponent pick the piles to split into gives them like so much control over like how they value the cards. When we first made this card, it like you picked the piles and then your opponent picked the one to pick or picked the one to keep. And that was like fine, but the way it ended up working out is you like never got to hit the card you like really actually wanted to hit because they would always just keep the best card. And you both know the best card. That's why you're using the card to remove it. So you never really got to do it that way. But this way, when we switched it, it was like, okay, so now my opponent can like evaluate for themselves what feels like most important to them. Is it like, are these allies more important than these ones? But maybe I can do these allies on one pile and these allies and a Victryl in the other one, or whatever. Like they can spread out their little combo, and so it makes the interaction for both players much more engaging. When they make their piles, they get a huge amount of agency over like how they want to present the mind game to you of like what to pick. And then when you now have to pick based on the piles they make, you now have to like sit there and think like, okay, so they evaluated these as this pile and that one. Well, why did I was going to put, I mean, the card they put in the small pile or in the big pile was the card I wanted anyway. So why is that pile less important to them? So then you have to think like, oh, okay, so the stuff that's left, why does that matter more to them than the things that I was planning to hit anyway? And it's just a really cool headspace for both players. It's been really fun to use. We had some internal concern that like maybe 5 cards is too many, and who knows? Like maybe with time it will prove that like that is true. But like in testing, that number has felt great. We tried it at like 3, and that was not enough. Because again, like I said, they made a pile of 2 and a pile of 1, and then they just kept the card you wanted to get rid of anyway. It's the up to thing is nice too because they don't have to have exactly 5 in play. They could have like just 3 or even just 1, and then they have to pick 1 and 0, and just pick the 1. So them making the piles has opened this up to being now a card. If they have only 1 card in play that you want to get rid of, this card can shuffle that card into their deck. What we wanted when we were making this is we didn't want to just like straight creep out the value of heroic deeds, because that card is really good, right? But this one is A, not heroes only, which is good, but B, both players have to like make different decisions. Yeah, it can hit like more things potentially, but the decision points are a lot more varied for players. Where with heroic deeds, I'm just going to play it and then bounce a card. I only hit 1, but I guarantee I get the one I want to hit, and it's there's a lot of variety in like which one you would pick. This one's also combat, so it can be sphered, which deeds can't. So there's just a lot of like highs and lows to this. it's been really, really fun in testing. Um, for me, I'm super glad it made the set. The joke of this card like existing was a thing I really wanted to happen, and it turned out it was just super, super fun to use. I think having this much board control is cool. The little text that's nice to have on this too is the under a card thing. There is currently, prior to this card, not a single card in the game that interacts with like the Janemba pocket dimension thing, and this card at least lets you address that if you are facing a Janemba deck. So that's a nice thing too. Weird other stuff too. It's not played, but like if someone was playing like intensity drill or something, you could like take cards out from under it. So there are ways you can use this for stuff, but generally it's like cards in play or cards under your opponent's mastery for Janemba. That's what it's like mostly for. But overall, I think this card has been awesome. I'm really excited to see if you guys think the same in playing it, and if it shapes the game as much as I like feel like it will. But I think this card is very playable, and I'm very excited for its existence.
Yeah, so Derek kind of went behind the scenes a little bit with this card. I don't actually go a little deeper into that. So when we first got this card, it was choose up to 3. You choose the piles, and your opponent chooses 1. So on that level, the card was basically the secondary from Gohan's or from Heroic Deeds, but worse. And so you get no attack, no damage, and it's a worse card. So they shipped that to us, and I'm like, look, I'm never going to put this card in a deck. And then, we went to, okay, well, let's go to 5 cards. So we go to 5 cards, and it ends up mostly the same where, how often do they really have 5 things in play? And when they do, if they get to keep their best thing or their best 2 things, are you really winning here? And the answer is most of the time no. So it still felt just super underwhelming. When we made the switch to its current text, then it became real interesting. All of the decision points were real interesting. I had a test game against somebody who did not know what the card did, and they had 5 allies in play and a couple of drills, and I used the card, and they're like, oh, that seems incredibly broken. And then they go to make their piles, and it's like 45 seconds to a minute of, wow, actually, this is a really cool decision point. And then they're deciding what to do, and then they finally make their piles. And then I have another point where it's like, okay, well, this is a huge decision point. There's a lot of things to factor in here. And then so I finally pick my pile, and he's like, man, that was a really cool effect. And it's like, yes, it is. It's not that the card is super strong, because it's not super strong. It's that if your opponent is playing a bunch of stuff, it's good. And if they're not playing a bunch of stuff, it's not even that good, honestly. This is not a card that I'm in a main deck, because I don't think it's a card that you're going to want in a lot of matchups. This is a card that I like in the Sensei deck a lot for decks that flood the board. And that's flooding the board with anything. You flood the board with allies, you flood the board with nons, you flood the board with attached cards. Like, this hits everything, right? So, like, if your opponent is going to give you 4, I think 4 is like the golden rule here. If your opponent's going to give you 4 cards in play so that you can get more than likely a 2-2 split or a 3-1 split where you got the best card versus everything else, like, this card's going to have a ton of value. So I like this a lot as a Sensei deck choice. I think this card has been super great in testing. And it never feels broken. It always just feels like, oh, cool, I got rid of, a couple of things. Or, I cut down, they got 3 allies and 2 nons in play. And, okay, well, maybe I cut down 2 allies and a non. Okay, that feels great. You're going to hit a couple of cards here. If this card effect's just hitting 1 card, generally it's always going to be worse than Deeds. And Deeds is also an attack that does damage. So, you don't want to play this card if your opponent's on a city deck or something like that. Unless you just desperately need another way to get rid of city. This does do that too. So this card has a lot of value in a lot of different decks and can do a lot of different things. But what it really boils down to is if your opponent's going to give you a lot of options to hit with this card, it's going to be a good card in that matchup. And if they're not, if they're just going to play, Black Trunk Saga Majin Buu with cities and nothing else, you probably don't want this for that matchup, and that's okay. But, if you decide to main deck this, in your city deck, or you're playing against a city deck, you can use this just says remove target city. You're shuffling target city. And sometimes that's fine. So it's a cool card. It's a cool effect. It took a long time. This card probably had more changes than almost anything else in the set because, I don't. I'm personally a big believer that why print a card if it's never going to see play, and so this card had to go through a few power ups to get to where it is right now.
Yeah, it almost like it was in the initial sort of like pile of things we wanted you guys to have, and then it got to the point where it like was so not good enough that it was like out of the set. And then as we were going through more cards, we were like, well, maybe that's like if we can make it better, maybe it's cooler than this other card that was going to make the set. And turns out it is. And so I'm glad it made it. It was the design challenge of getting it to where it was really fun. We talk a little bit about there being like knobs to turn on cards, and like, oh, this like idea is right, but like the knobs need turned. It needs to do like a little more damage, or like a little less anger, or a little more removal, or whatever it needs to have. But there's like little knobs you can turn to like turn numbers up and down to tweak it. And this went through a lot of those before it kind of found the happy place. But I'm very pleased with where it ended up. And Nick made one little point there at the end that I wanted to say, and that like if you're going to play like a real heavy non-combat deck, you've typically got ways to handle city anyway, so like you're not hurting for those. But this might be a card you main deck in a deck like that, where like having your whole board of non-combats to do in a turn is like incredibly relevant. Just having this be, I'm going to pick exactly city and shuffle it into your deck, because I'm never going to pick more than one card with this. I'm going to pick exactly city. If this card literally just says choose your opponent's city and play and shuffle it into their deck, if you're the deck that city like straight hoses, you might just play this. I agree that most of the time this is going to be a Sensei deck card, but I've loved having it in Sensei decks. It's sort of like Frieza's Deception, where like I'm going to play it, and it's going to feel awesome when it's good, and then I won't put it in when it's not.
Uh-huh. All right, so next up on the list is Majin B Team. So this is a combat card that cannot be used if your MP is Majin Buu, which, for those of you who are unaware, this is a card text that I love and that I wish we had on more cards. So this is Majin only. Remove the top X cards of your opponent's discard pile from the game, where X is the number of Majin personalities in play. For the remainder of combat, attacks you perform are considered to have Majin in the title and are either focused or deal +2 stages or life cards of damage. So there's a lot to take in with this card. First of all, it's a Majin only card, so we're real limited in who exactly can use it. You're looking at some of the new Majins, or Deborah's underlings like Pui Pui. Deborah's underlings. Man, I'm having one. Bobity's underlings like Pui Pui and Yakon and some of these guys. So what this card tries to do, and I'll let Derek go into this mostly because I know this is one of his pet cards. Remove the X cards from your opponent's discard pile from the game. Most of the time, that's going to be like a Calamity trigger, or that's the throwback to Pui Pui, where Pui Pui cares about having RFG cards. And then attacks, all attacks having Majin in the title, there's some value to that from various locations, battlegrounds, things like that you can use. And they're either focused, obviously Deborah cares about focus cards, or they're modifiers, which modifiers also help all MPs. This card it's kind of a complex card. There's a lot going on, but I'm kind of going to turn this one over to Derek because this is more Derek's card here. So go ahead.
So with NZ, one of the things that we've done a lot of is we've made like a card for a guy. Like we made Orange Ginyu Force Flash, which was for the Ginyu Force deck, to try to build like a deck for that dude. Or like even Celestial Halo, which was like a card for the Celestial Fighters. It wasn't for like a specific dude, but it was for those guys. And we've done that with like a couple of cards before. The Red Mighty Mask Secret, that is a card to like build a Mighty Mask deck with. Future Trunks is like for Future Gohan. Majin B Team is an exercise in like trying to do a card for a guy multiple times without needing to waste like 6 card slots. So it's a Deborah card, it's a Yakon card, it's a Pui Pui card, it's a Spopovich card. It is specifically not a Buu card. But yeah, Nick nailed like most of the things he mentioned. The removing cards in the discard pile. A, we've talked about discard pile hate being good, but B, that's good because Pui Pui. Focused is great for Deborah. Extra stages is good for Spopovich because Spopovich is already a stage modifier deck. Yakon is a life card modifier deck, so you get life card damage modification with him. So it just like each of these cards is kind of like this card can basically slot into each of those lesser B team Majin personalities without having to make like the new Yakon only card or the new Dabura only card. This card can kind of just go into all those decks and do the thing that deck is supposed to do. And I think it's cool at doing that. It's got a little buff for each of the cards for each of those MPs in one place. You aren't going to get like all of these effects. They aren't going to matter for most of like for the Pui Pui deck. You're not going to care a ton that you're like all your attacks are Majin or whatever. Maybe that's fine, but you're not going to care a ton that that's what you're doing. You're not going to care that they're all focused. Although having things be all focused is never bad. Don't get me wrong.
No, it is not.
But like it's not like, oh man, my deck really needed focused attacks. Like it's not. That's not where it did that. Or like the +2 stages or +2 life is still not bad. But the individual like snippets of this card are all like big benefits to the guy who is supposed to use that part of the card, and then the rest of it is just like sort of generally good. So I think this card is cool in all of those stacks. We'll see if it like proves to actually matter. Like I don't know that like this card isn't going to make Spopovich good, right? Because he's just not in general. But like we've made a lot of orange physical stuff, right? So now if you're going to play orange World Game Saga Spopovich and he's given +2 to all your attacks and your Mastery's given +2 to all your attacks, and then this is making all of your attacks the rest of combat +2. And then all of them are Majin, so if you've got the Majin in the middle of nowhere in play, now they're all +5, or sorry, +3. So you've added +6 stages to every, +9 stages to like every attack you're doing all combat. You can like really line it up to have like some value there. You can make them all focused if you want them all to hit and get through like a time for the turn. So there's just neat ways to kind of utilize when you trigger this in those sort of lesser decks. You've still got to know that you are playing the B squad of the Majins. Like if you're building Yakon, you know that you're not like here to dominate the meta, and this card still isn't gonna do that, but it will make your deck better. And that's a thing. Like that's a place that I like to. Nick made a point a couple cards ago about like let's not make cards that are never going to see play, and this is one that like is probably the closest to that of cards we've made for a while, where you to play this card effectively you really need to be playing a deck that is less than effective. So you've just sort of got to lean into knowing that that's what you're doing. But I do think it makes every one of those decks better. I think it makes Dabura better. I think it makes Pui Pui better. Yakon, Spopovich, all those decks I think get better because of this card. The real question will be like if any of them land because of it. We'll see. But just using this to make all of your attacks focused and then have those focused attacks with if successfuls now be used twice in a Dabura deck. We were just talking about that in the league relatively recently. Like there are things that you can do to like stack this up to be really relevant. So I'm curious to see if anyone will find a way to kind of unhinge this card. In testing, it was cool. There's nothing where it like made a detrimental to the meta like power level spike. So it just kind of was like, yeah, this is fine. Nothing felt bad or nothing felt broken to like allow this. But I don't think it was like, yeah, dude, this like full sends it. Now we've got Yakon as like tier 1. I don't think that's gonna happen, But I think if you want to, for the James Sawyers of the world playing their Yakon decks, like they're gonna play this, and it's gonna feel good.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of side events too in the league now where, you might get a specific MP that you have to play or something like that. So, just drawing Yakon doesn't feel quite so bad if there's a couple more Yakon support cards like this that exist, right? So that's something to be at least cognizant of. And, you never know. Somebody's favorite MP may be Yakon. I mean, I'm pretty well known for loving Pui Pui. I absolutely love him. It's my favorite MP in the game. And, nobody's going to confuse Pui Pui for Majin Buu when it comes to a power level. So
I think that's a neat point that you brought up. The side event like value little level, like in Magic sets or whatever, where they make a commander only card or stuff like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there are just cards that are for a format.
Mm-hmm.
And this might not be your typical like go into a standard deck or even to a tough enough deck or whatever. But for our side events where we do like goofy MPs where you get assigned a guy or whatever, this kind of thing is going to feel really fun there. I think this is like a perfect example of the kind of card that reminds you that like at the end of the day, this is all still a hobby. Like we're all still here to just like have fun with the cards we love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this card does a really good job of just being like a fun card to use, cards you wouldn't normally put into sleeves. Nick, you can have this one. I just talked about that card a lot.
Okay, all right. So the next up, we got Glorio Draws Steel. So it has a parenthetical. If you declare Tokuwaza, this card is a style card matching your Tokuwaza. So I want to talk about that for a second real quick before we delve into the card. A lot of cards that are freestyle don't make cuts into style decks when they should, because of the fact that they're not styled, because the fact that the mastery cares about styled effects or other cards in the deck care about styled effects. So this card having that it ups its value exponentially just automatically, which is really cool, which is a really cool effect. If you're playing orange, this counts as an orange energy attack for you if you're playing something like that. So having that is like, don't underestimate how powerful that effect is. So anyway, this is an energy attack that costs 0. Great, free energy. Choose up to 3 cards with different titles in your opponent's discard pile. Search their discard pile for all copies of those cards and remove them from the game. If you remove less than 5 cards with this effect, this attack does +2 life cards of damage. Okay, so what does this do really? Well, this is the energy version of Majin Buu's heal kit, kind of. So you get to choose 3 cards and remove them from your opponent's discard pile, and if they have multiple copies of those cards, you get to remove multiple copies. If they did not have enough that you remove 5 cards with this effect, then it does 6 life cards instead. So what this can be really easily is an energy for 6 that removes some cards from your opponent's discard pile from the game. You can use this to target their transform cards, or maybe something else that is scary for your deck specifically. Maybe they got energy stop balls and you don't want to mess with those. They got 2 Sand Planet Explosions. Well, I don't want them to shuffle them back or Expectant Trunks or Fatherly them, so let's get rid of them. I think that most of the time when you play this card, you're going to purposely choose to remove less than 5 cards with this effect so that you can get the +2 life cards of damage. Now, if your opponent has already stop-alled you or something like that, or you know this is not going to go through, then maybe you look for the full effect. But at the end of the day, most cards that care about your opponent's RFG pile are things like, Pui Pui, level 3 and stuff like that. You might want to get the maximum when you're using that, but otherwise, just hitting the cards that really matter, that's all that you're really going to care about. The good thing that this does have, though, is that it's really good against the 2 styles that are the best 2 styles in the game currently, which are blue and black. Blue and black both have a lot of discard pile recursion and a lot of good transform cards. So it being able to hit those decks specifically is real strong. Black has, of course, Aura Eruption and Gallic Gun and all these good transform cards, as well as Buffer Block, which gets a card back from the discard pile, and Roundhouse, which gets a card back from the discard pile. So you can get a lot of value from picking apart a discard pile of those cards from a black deck. And blue's kind of the same boat, where it has Colossal Throw, plus Colossal Throw gets back other blue cards. So again, this card is not necessarily going to feel broken or really strong in some matchups. There's some matchups where it's like, all right, energy for 6 that's free. The secondary effect doesn't really matter. But the good thing about this is that when in the matchups where the secondary effect does matter, it's going to be outstandingly good. This card, I think, personally, is a card that's not going to see a lot of play because people are going to not understand how good this card is. People are finally catching on to Majin Buu's heal pick and why it's so strong and the fact that they should be playing more of it. This is the energy version, and it's probably slightly better even though you don't gain the stages. It's at least comparable. And the fact that it's free in an energy deck is outstandingly good. If you're playing an energy build, you should really give this deck a shot, this card a shot. It's going to go well with your mastery. It's going to pair with your, with your explosion mastery, with your orange masteries, your various masteries. Even if you're playing Saiyan, and if you hit this with your mastery with any of your Saiyan style mastery, it counts. It counts, and that's a huge value. So going back to the original point. Being styled is a huge value too. This is just a card you need to work into your deck. Give it a shot, because I know that it seems a little underwhelming on the cover, but like once you get into how strong this card can be, especially against the decks that are already really good, you're gonna love this card.
I don't think there's a thing I can say about this that Nick didn't nail. This card's awesome. Discard pile height, monumentally important, and if you don't have enough to hate, just getting some extra damage out of it feels great. This card has been a very welcome inclusion in the game. The style that Parenthetical makes it feel really good to have, and yeah, I run this card. All right. Well, that's our last styled card. I had to look for a second, but we're done. We've made it to the end. This is a long one. Like I said at the beginning, we don't really know exactly how some of this stuff is going to shape out. So there's a lot more to kind of ponder and think about. So if you made it this far, thanks for that. We'll be back with part 2, and we'll talk about the rest of the cards in the set. I hope you guys enjoy NZ Set 8 Grand Adventure. I hope it shapes up to be as cool as it felt like it was for us when we were making it. This is one of my favorite sets we've ever made. It was one of the most fun to make, and I'm just really excited to see where it takes the game.